We are standing in for Jan Martel today, who couldn't make it. And we are both poets and novelists, and we will read from some of our work. ആദ്യമേ ഞാൻ ഒരു പോയം പറയും, അത് ഗസൽ ആ. Ghazal, North Indian, is a North Indian kind of form. ഇംഗ്ലീഷിൽ പറയുവാണെങ്കിൽ നോർത്ത് ഇന്ത്യയിൽ അവർക്ക് ദേഷ്യം വരും. ഇവിടെ അത് ആവത്തില്ല. ഈ ഗസലിൻ്റെ പേരാ മലയാളം ഗസൽ. മലയാളംസ് ഗസൽ. ഇതാ ഗസൽ. Listen, someone is saying a prayer in Malayalam. He says there's no space for despair in Malayalam. Sometimes at daybreak you sing a Gujarati garba. At night you open your hair in Malayalam. To understand symmetry, understand Kerala. The longest palindrome is there in Malayalam. When you've been too long in the rooms of English, open your window to the fresh air of Malayalam. Visitors are welcome to the school of lost tongues. Someone's endowed a high chair in Malayalam. O ancestors, I greet you. O scholars and linguists, my father who recites Baudelaire in Malayalam. Jeet, such drama with the scraps that you know. Recite a couplet, if you dare, in Malayalam. These next poems are short entries in a kind of a diary, and each one tells you how to be the creature in that poem. The first one is called How to Be a Toad. Take 3 fresh spores with a dram of rum. Hold it on your tongue for longish moments. Pack all thoughts of gold in a small leather case the size of a sapphire. Tell yourself repeatedly, I will never again be beautiful. How to be a leaf. Hold your breath until you are God's green thoughts. Stop eating. The air will suffice for food. Water is another matter. The skin absorbs nutrients. The eyes adjust. The limbs grow inward. Conjugate patience. Worship women and trees. How to be a horse. Know the nostril. All power gathers there. Inflate yours until the blood rings. It will take all your training to be horse, not ass. This is a thin crossing, perilous to the absent-minded and the estranged of heart. Avoid all latitudes. This is the last one. It's called How to Be a Bandicoot. A bandicoot is an enormous rat found in Bombay and in Delhi. I don't know if you have them in Kochi, but probably. It's an unkillable rat. You can't drown it. You can't shoot it. If you can't poison it. They just come back to life. It's breakfast, you know. So this is called How to Be a Bandicoot. Assume dominance over the underworld. Your enemies are legion. Eat them. Eat everything. You must build your strength. A crash will surely come. Your eyes are red legends. Your name is Adam. And your name is Eve. Thank you very much. Please welcome Megha Rao, who stepped in at the very last moment, a hero.
Hi, can everyone hear me? Yes? Okay. But etra perana Jan Martelne kaana vendi vannaru? Can I? Me too. That's my point. I came here to watch Jan Martel. ഞാൻ കുറച്ച് നേരത്തെ എത്തി അതുകൊണ്ട് പിന്നെ അവരെന്നെ പിടിച്ച് സ്റ്റേജിലിട്ടു. That's the only difference. So I wanted to know, anyone willing to switch places with me? Come on, don't be mean. Yes or no? Come on. Okay. You know, maybe that's a tall order. Okay. How about, okay, I'll ask something that's not too much. Will you be nice to me while I perform? For my 2 poems? Is that okay? Okay. So, we have a little ritual in spoken word. If you like something that I say, any line, you snap. നിങ്ങൾക്ക് ഏതെങ്കിലും വരി ഇഷ്ടമാവുന്നുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ you just snap. Can I hear that? Perfect. Wonderful. And ഏതെങ്കിലും വരി ഇഷ്ടമായില്ലെങ്കിൽ, if you don't like something that I said, what do? Nothing. You don't do anything. You go home, you complain about me, that's fine, but nothing else, all right? The first poem that I have for you today is called Pauses. It's about slowing down. I lived in some very big cities for many years, and every time I would come home to Trivandrum, I found myself in a very beautiful situation where life didn't feel very fast. I mean, think about it. You wake up, you do some krishi, you go to the nearby chai kada, you have one parampuri, you come home, you do your work, and then again in the evening, you have some tea. Great, right? And that's what this poem is about. This poem is called Pauses. When I was younger, I wanted things. I still do. I dream about having wings. Sometimes I'm aeroplanes and tours and fancy stages, moving through crowds, windows down as the adrenaline rages. The only beautiful thing I knew was living fast, working so hard that one day I would get to the top at last. You see, they put you in schools and teach you words like first and topper and competition and winner and loser. That's the worst. And suddenly you're in this loop, running and running and running until you hit a wall and have a terrible, terrible fall. They put you in cubicles and suits and upgrade you, but everyone knows that corner office is meant only for a few. And even if you quit, the new place you go to loses its shine. Before you know it, you're working all the way till 9. So what if you do finally land your dream job? One day, you find yourself holding back a confused sob because all you ever do, even with the things you love, is race and race and race until your feet can't keep up with the pace. Nobody ever told you that you were allowed to take a break. Nobody ever told me that I was allowed to take a break. So do it. Take that break. You get to stop, you get to pause, you get to calm down, you get to stay indoors and wear some lame flower crown, dance around with a glass of wine to melodrama, wear nothing but an old SpongeBob SquarePants pajama. I know that it's hard to take a step back, but I did it anyway. Read a book, took an afternoon nap, and it was really okay. So now there are things I'm learning gently with age. Life is a novel and there's a rare happiness in savoring every single page. I learned that my self-worth can be measured in smaller ways, that dragging the gas cylinder all the way to my flat is a talent, that I might just put watering houseplants on my new resume, that I can take time out of my busy schedule to focus on the more important things like laughing and journaling and cooking and maybe just existing. You see, time spent relaxing will never be time gone to waste. Even if I'm no longer headlights on the highway or glamorous nights in Bombay, I am still worthy. I don't need to hurry. So the world can keep its nasty popularity contest. You're skipping the rat race and taking a detour with me. We'll talk about the skill of being good at life, about nourishing friendships and remembering birthdays, about drawing boundaries and making colleagues smile on Mondays, because I know that you can paint and play the piano and even win a marathon. But tell me about your special gift of carrying groceries home. Tell me about your knack for taking care of stray dogs, calling your grandmother up and being a good listener, and I will show you how good I am at loosening up, at halting once in a while so that I don't blow up. Because I'm not always the city that never sleeps, pacing backstage, prepping for a late night show. Some days, I'm the Himalayas, sipping black coffee and stargazing through a cabin window. Some days, I am immovable and slow. And yet, I'm stable and always learning how to grow. Thank you. Okay, so my next and last poem is something that I turn to when I feel a little sad or weak so that I can, just feel better about myself. But it's not a very feel-good poem. It's a very angry poem. But yeah, I don't want to over-explain it. But this one is called Those Who Break You. Those who break you will one day bow to you. Those who break you will one day bow to you. The enemy will burst into a bouquet of flowers and they will apologize for being cowards who tried to step on you. Apologize for the harm they tried to do. But this is how the story goes. Seething, crying, drunk driving, bruising yourself on strangers' beds. Your therapist begging you to take your meds. Traumatized and broken-hearted, that's how you started. But this is how the story goes. Glitter on cheeks, paint on toes, do your liner heavy, prepare to get ready, march into the city streets like a divine beast, a visual feast. Wear that blazer right now, not later. There is no special occasion. You are the special occasion. Fuck the side character, you're a hero. All new age, every single angle shot from the female gaze, and they don't get to damage you like that and then expect you to keep looking back. Tell them your eyes are too pretty to be looking at crap. Like, who the fuck do they think they are? You didn't come this far to fall here, so my dear, don't you dare shed a tear. Because the gods were tripping when they made you. Head banging to your breath like it was trance music. You were meant to make it big. So let them watch and burn and wish they had you back. But the fact is that this is how the story goes. Higher and higher and higher you rose from rock bottom when they thought you were forgotten. You showed the world that this is your story. No, you are the story. You're unstoppable, unshakable, untamable, invincible. You are magic that's meditating. You are dangerous because no matter what, you are always growing. But above all, you saved yourself. You are brave, no doubt. You didn't let adversity fold you into origami and throw you in the trash and all that jazz. You woke up, you got up, you worked your way through it all to shine hard and stand tall. And if anyone makes you feel small ever again, remember, my friend, you are not theirs to destroy. Do you hear me? You are not theirs to destroy. So don't you dare stand there grieving over what they did to you, and instead look at what you've become. Accept what you've become, acknowledge what you've become, and celebrate what you've become. A testimony to holy resurrection, your comeback, a personal revolution. You are freedom and you are grace. You are rain and you are riot. Not subtle and not quiet. You are graphic and unrestrained. Your beauty refusing to be chained. You are fire and you are love. the kind that has doves inside its boxing gloves. You are the raging force of all the things that you have survived and will continue to survive for as long as you are alive. Thank you. Okay, so the one thing that I remember Jeet saying in the beginning was that both of us are poets, but we also write novels. I myself find myself experimenting a lot with form. So there are a lot of questions that I want to ask Jeet. So I'm gonna go sit back there now, and I'm gonna ask my questions. But I hope that you enjoyed these poems. Okay, how do I turn this off?
Thank you for that. We're going to talk about each of our new books. I have a novel, and Megha has a novel in verse, and we're both going to talk about it, The Elsewerians and Teething. Which one should we start with?
As in, do you want me to ask a question to you, or like, are you...
No, I mean, which book should we start with?
Oh, anything, whatever works with you.
You
You can ask from Teething. From Teething, you can ask.
All right, let's
Yeah.
do that. So Teething is a new novel in verse, and in less than 80 pages, it covers a lot of ground, from homophobia to childhood trauma to buried family history, family secrets. It begins with the story of a boy in Kerala who's caught kissing another boy, and the revelation or the discovery or the outing ends in tragedy. Years later, the dysfunction of the family at the center of the narrative is laid bare in the book Teething. And I wondered if there was a violence implicit in the title, Teething.
Okay, so a little bit of context before I even talk about the violence implicit in the title itself. Yes, there is a character called Kochu in this poetry collection who is gay. And I think that I really wanted to write about this because I remember reading that gay men and bisexual men are 4 times more likely to commit suicide than heterosexual men. And I did speak to so many of my gay friends, and listening to their lived experience, it made me feel like, okay, you know what? I think that there are so many things that aren't spoken enough because these are topics which are taboo. Teething is a collection which has a lot of themes. One of it is this. Another one I've realized is actually trauma, something I didn't realize when I was writing it until it got picked up by Kerala University, and they included it in trauma narratives. And that's when I was like, okay, this book is about trauma. For me, yeah, it's a lot of things, but the violence here is also going back in time. When you come from a broken childhood, and these characters do, they find themselves in a place where they have to go backwards and relive their childhood so that they can even move forward in life. So apart from teething itself means growing teeth, and that's a very painful process. It's also about reclaiming your childhood when it's been so broken.
In Teething and in your novel, Our Bones in Your Throat, the story sounds exceedingly personal, if not confessional. And I wanted to ask, how personal is the story or the stories? And when you're embarking on a book, how do you navigate that division between the personal and the political? Because once it goes out into the world, it's political. And I wondered if you could tell us something about the craft involved in expanding a single incident or a single idea into something wide enough to take a novel?
So I think that confessionalism is something that I find myself gravitating towards a lot, almost all the time when I write, whether it's a novel, whether it's poetry. And I think I first started being comfortable with it when I read Kamala Das or Madhavi Kuti. I found that, okay, if someone can be so brave in such a patriarchal society for that time, then I think that it feels, I mean, I just wanted to try it out. Like, what does it mean? I've got nothing left to lose. And when I did start speaking my truth, it felt very liberating. And yeah, confessionalism has been a really big part of my writing. And I don't even know if it's even possible to separate the personal from any art form. I actually had a similar question for you, because I know that even in your work, there is a lot of honesty, a lot of confessionalism too, like your poetry and your novels. So doesn't this confessionalism come with a bit of vulnerability, or a lot of it? I mean, being honest with the world and also being honest with yourself. How do you navigate that vulnerability particularly?
Yeah, I think it's a kind of a fundamental question, especially for poetry when you write poems, and increasingly for me in prose as well. And this most recent book, The Elsewherians, I call it a documentary novel because there are characters in it, like my parents, for example, TJS George and Amu George, whose photographs appear in the book, and whose life stories are used in the book, but fictionalized, because there's, they often say things they didn't say in real life and would never have said in real life, and do things that they might never have done in real life. Of course, I had to ask permission of them before I wrote this book, as I was writing it. And my father was very kind of happy with the idea, thrilled with the idea, said yes immediately. My mother, being a warier and wiser in some ways, knew that what this would involve. And she didn't say yes right away. And when of course, there was no question that she would ever say no. But when she did say yes, it was reluctantly, and she knew what was coming. And I'm happy that she got to see some pages on screen before she passed in January. So, yeah, especially with this book, I think the element of confessionalism or the personal, which invariably becomes political at some point, I think without it, you are denying yourself and the reader some really crucial information, that makes the book bigger, I think.
You mentioned having photographs in the Elsewherians, and I know that you also call it a documentary novel. It's a lot of things then. It's a novel, it's a photo series, it's also a travelogue, it's also quite autobiographical, so you could call it a memoir. How did you set out to experiment with form, or was this something that happened organically? Tell us more about that.
Thanks. That's a great question, actually. I didn't set out to do this. When I started, I had no idea that this was the shape that the book would eventually take. I worked on it for about 4 years, and I think it took about 3 years for the form to crystallize in my mind and on the page. And once that happened, everything fell into place, and I knew it would be set in different parts of the world. I ended up taking out about 48,000 words. Almost, 3/4 of the book actually ended up taking out. And although I think that was the best thing to do, because it made it tighter, it made it shorter, it made it fast-paced, and there are bits of it that even read sort of like a ghost story or a thriller of a ghost story. And it, when you say that it's all those things, a memoir, a family saga, a ghost story, a thriller, a travel memoir, it sounds like a baggy monster. But life is a baggy monster. And if you're going to be at all true to life, I think it's all right to embrace the bagginess and the monstrosity of it. Yeah.
Agreed. And also, even the title, right? The Elsewherians. You do talk about how George and Amu, they have lived in so many other places that they've become the Elsewherians. Do you also, is that a term that you also find yourself aligning with? And I mean, I also wanted to know how that shapes identity as well, like being in so many places and feeling like you're an Elsewherian yourself.
I think even if at this point in our history and in our national history, even if you've lived in only one place your whole life, if you've only lived in a small town in Alipay, for example, or if you've only lived in Kottayam or only lived in a little place in Pune your whole life, you still feel like an Elsewherian because the place has changed so quickly and so profoundly around you that your own so-called home feels like a foreign place. And I think we're all Elsewherians. You can no longer ask the question to somebody, where are you from? Yeah. And get a one-line response. And if you do, that's false. I mean, would you consider yourself an Elsewherian?
Yeah, definitely. I think, for the longest time, I also struggled a lot with my Malayali identity because technically I'm not Malayali. I speak Tulu at home, but I grew up in Trivandrum, and for me it was like, but then I also only moved to Trivandrum in my 6th grade, so I didn't know Malayalam. So there would be this like one boy who would run up to me every day and he'd be like, say this word, say Aksharaspurada. I was like, I don't know how to say whatever that is. So I always felt like, okay, this is strange to me. Every time I would tell people I'm a Malayali and the kids would be like, you don't look like one, you're not, go ask your mom. So then I would be like, am I not? And my mom would be like, no, you're not. So for the longest time, it was hard to say I'm from either of these places. But then I realized that as you grow older, you pick who you want to be, and nobody gets to tell you who you are or who you're not. So I am an Elsewherian, but on my own terms. How does that sound?
Sounds about right. In fact, I think that's exactly the way to put it. And it brings me to a question I wanted to ask you. There are often Malayali or Kerala references in your writing, in the novel and in the poetry. And I find them kind of joyous expressions of food and culture and identity. Would you say that there are influences, Kerala influences in your work? And if so, who and what are they?
There are, I feel like this state influences a lot of my writing, but it also came to a point where I couldn't understand why there was not enough writing about. At least like I couldn't see a lot of fiction and poetry about Kerala. I know there are like so many Malayalam writers who are yet to be translated. So many beautiful books. Like very recently I walked into a bookstore and I came across this novel called Zin by Harita Savitri. And it was recently translated at that time. And I realized, how come no one's talking about this? It's a beautiful book. It's actually it's a political tragedy about the Kurdish movement. And it kind of makes me sad because I'm like, yes, we need more visibility when it comes to English language literature. So, and it was also a question of, I am reading about all these characters, but I need someone who's a lot like me. Even very recently, I was researching for another book, and I wanted to speak to a trans man from Kerala, specifically Kottarakara, because I was like, that's where I'm from. And I also need to understand what the experience is like for someone who's from here, because I don't think that readers know enough about that. So it's also about visibility for me. It's like I need more people talking about this place in the right way, by the way, because we know the kind of visibility that we see. We see the Kerala story. We see there was some other movie also that came out which made absolutely no sense. It was fully wrong. They just picked out a lot of cliches. They showed women climbing coconut trees and people eating on banana leaves. And I'm like, we don't do that every day. What are you talking about? So it was just about accurate representation and visibility. And you asked about influences. I would say, yeah, I did mention Kamala Das. I also feel like I really like K.R. Meera. She just had a session. I know that a lot of you were a part of it. I thought that Arachar was very beautiful. I found the English translation also really good, Hangwoman. So, yeah, I've been also trying to get to know more women writers who write in Malayalam. Bashir is also one of my inspirations, though, because I grew up reading Bashir and I found Bashir's language to be very simple, which was what I needed when I had just moved to Trivandrum. So I really love Bashir's Patumide and all of that. Really good. I love it. So, yeah.
I just want to say, Kamala Das's influence on me as well. She influenced men as well because her voice was so unique and individual and bold at a time when you didn't expect that from Indian poets of any gender. And she was a family friend. And when I first wrote poems at about the age of 15 or 16, my father sent her poems, and she was so kind and generous in her response. Yeah, I'm with you all the way when it comes to Kamala Das.
Even the confessionalism was, that she wrote was also, I would say it's political in some way because she was standing up for her own self in a society that didn't want her to. I've also noticed you not more than touching upon, but diving deep into the political in your own work. I do remember that in Law, it felt like there was a very deep commentary about political leaders. I know that even your poetry is quite political. Narcopolis felt like, there was a lot about social class and power. So I have this question about how, do you believe that all art should be political or even all art cannot escape the political? Because I know there's always this debate about art for art's sake and art for life's sake. So what do you think about that?
When I was young, I believed that art for art's sake, almost like a religion. And I think most young writers and artists do. You think art should be only for its own sake. And somehow when you're young and arrogant and you think you're a genius, you think that, oh, politics is below me, I'm an artist. And of course, then you grow older and you realize you're not a genius and you're shaped by your environment. And especially at this point in Indian history and in American history, how can you be an artist in India and not be aware of and responding to and writing to the country that you live in and the political situation that you're in, especially that's become so evident in the last 10 years. It's I think it's actually a mistake to ignore it. And it's the kind of thing that if it were not to show up in a book, 20 years down the line, a reader who reads that novel set in 2025 is going to wonder what was up with this writer. Were they asleep or on drugs or something? How could they ignore this absolutely kind of violently visible reality around them?
So you do believe that writers have a responsibility, but also in a non presumptuous way, right? Like is a writer thinking that, oh, this is my responsibility, something that, I mean, is that something that they should feel? Or do you think that it's, like self-indulgent? Because a lot of writers I know, I mean, I've come across people talking about politics just because something went viral and they want to be part of the movement. But I've seen that sort of virtue signaling. But I've also seen people who detach themselves from that kind of self-important behavior and not make it about themselves. So how do you approach something like this without making yourself the center focus, without crossing the line, without, standing or staying in your own lane?
In fact, I think that's the question that every writer needs to deal with at this point. It also reminds me of something Amitav Ghosh said about the climate. He said that if you write a novel, a capacious novel, and it ignores climate change at this particular moment in our shared history, you're leaving out something that will seem very surprising to succeeding generations. And I think when you see yourself as a speck in the eye of history, especially when it comes to climate change or this kind of political wave that's sweeping over the planet at this point, not just India, the US, parts of Europe, there's a real swing to an extremity. And if that isn't evident, I think, of course, probably I won't be around at the time, but there will be answers a ghost of my future self might have to make to readers in the future. I think that's a valid thing to think about now for a writer.
Yeah, I think that every writer should have those ethical conversations first before even diving into writing. Okay, so circling back to the Elsewherians, I would love for you to read something from the book, any passage that you love.
I'm going to read a section set in Kerala, obviously, which is from the opening of the book. And then we'll open it up for questions. A week before the wedding, a dozen tents appear between the house and the steps that lead to the river. Thommen is summoned, a wedding cook famous for his bad temper and his red mean curry. He arrives with an assistant and a cartload of clay pots, knives, cauldrons, an assortment of long metal ladles and short ones made of coconut shells, bunches of fresh and dried herbs, bundles of rich chamandi powder made with a well-guarded list of ingredients committed to memory, and a barrel of his own coconut oil. His assistant, a woman with a temper as unpredictable as Thommen's, takes the tent as her own. He calls her his wife, although his wife is long gone, unable to reconcile to the gypsy lifestyle and the violence she was forced to endure for most of her marriage. His road wives change at will, and they share a quality with his curries, extreme volatility. During the season, Thommen travels for months at a time. Depending on the size of the wedding and the size of the payment, he stays for a few weeks. Sorry, he stays for a few days or a week. His mean curry is a purist's invention that uses only 7 ingredients: hand-picked chunks of kingfish, fistfuls of red chili powder, rock salt, mustard seeds, a hint of diced shallots, ginger, and the precious black lumps of Malabar tamarind he sources from Alipay and secretes among his personal effects. He refuses to sully the dish with those ingredients he deems contaminants: curry leaves, green chilies, coconut milk, and fenugreek. The result is fiery, glazed with a thick layer of coconut oil, and tastes best a day after cooking. So Thoman makes vast quantities in advance, filling clay pot after clay pot. Everything else he'll make on the morning of the wedding: pork ghee roast, egg roast, beef fry with coconut, mountains of white rice and hillocks of red, papadums with no gleam of the oil in which they've been deep fried, only the aroma, appams fermented with a touch of sweet and sour toddy, tapioca steamed plain and unsalted, purposely bland to complement the tear-inducing fish curry, pan-fried shrimps, fried sardines marinated in red chili, turmeric, and salt, chicken stew creamy with coconut milk, diced potatoes and carrots, thin sear fish cutlets. These are traditional preparations served at every wedding. But Thoman excels in items no other wedding cook would attempt. Rabbit stewed for 3 hours with chunks of raw jaggery and homemade wine. Batter-fried frog's legs with tamarind pineapple pachadi. Deep-fried anchovies for touchings. Raw mango and sweet lime pickle for lickings. Dosa stuffed with sweet crab meat. Stingray steak served with ginger chutney and cut carrot pickle with a lethal coconut prawn, gunpowder, podi on the side. While cooking, Thoman drinks fresh toddy in the morning and fermented toddy in the afternoon. After sunset, he switches to arak. The lamp in his tent burns half the night. At 2 or 3 in the morning come the screams of his current wife, high-pitched, ungrammatical, unhinged. "Which woman stay with you?" Thoman does not reply, and his silence infuriates her more than any words he might fling. "Old man, no teeth, what good?" It's true that some of Thoman's teeth are missing. His food is slow cooked over wood fires and known as melt in the mouth for this reason. It's the only way he can enjoy his own food. The reference to his teeth gives her the response she's been craving. He beats her, she beats him. There follow the sounds of violent lovemaking, the smack, the moan, the rhythmic bed creak. Next morning, it's business as usual. At night, the scenario repeats. That's it.
I really loved the food imagery. It was very visual, very specific. Lovely. Thank you so much for sharing. Sorry about the very random plug-in, but today, just before leaving my hotel room, this volunteer ran up to me and he was like, "I recognize you. You're the person who read that poem on Palestine for some lit fest." And I said, "Yes, you're right." And he said, "Thank you," for which, I didn't know how to respond to that, because what do you mean, thank you? But it also made me realize that the stage cannot be my own, especially with what is happening in the world right now. We are, there's literally a genocide going on. It feels, there's a very big cognitive dissonance that I experience here where I'm like, okay. what's going on.
Reassurance from the world around us.
I want to read this poem, a very short one by a Palestinian poet called Noor Hindi. It's called Fuck Your Lecture on Craft, My People Are Dying. I'll just take 1 minute. Yeah. Colonizers write about flowers. I tell you about children throwing rocks at Israeli tanks, seconds before becoming daisies. I want to be like those poets who care about the moon. Palestinians don't see the moon from jail cells and prisons. It's so beautiful, the moon. They're so beautiful, the flowers. I pick flowers for my dead father when I'm sad. He watches Al Jazeera all day. I wish Jessica would stop texting me Happy Ramzan. I know I'm American because when I walk into a room, something dies. Metaphors about death are for poets who think ghosts care about sound. When I die, I promise to haunt you forever. One day, I will write about the flowers like we own them. So, questions from the audience?
Yes, any questions from the audience? Now is the time. Yeah. Can we have a mic over there?
Hi, thank you for all the poems and the reading. You just read a poem saying fuck craft, obviously, but I still have a question about your craft. You both spoke about, politics and about writing and about sort of how you weave it into your craft, right? So my question essentially was that do you do it consciously or do you do it unconsciously? Like what is the practice like for both of you? What is the process like? So when you're writing and you're thinking about all of these things, and then how do you sort of weave it in?
I think for me, especially in the kind of times we live in, I mean, we live in the internet age, so I feel like we've got front row tickets to every violence that's happening. You can't unsee it. You can't, move away from it or take a step back from it, because sometimes I feel like even stepping back from it for mental health feels like a privilege that a lot of people don't have. So when I'm exposed to that constantly, even through a screen or even through reading about it, I think because I'm so exposed to it on a consistent basis, even if, it makes me uncomfortable, I guess it just comes into everything I write. Like, I don't think that it's something that I do consciously. It's just something that finds itself on the page, and it happens. I don't want to use the word subconsciously or even naturally, because all of it sounds, it doesn't sound right, So I would just say that I can't escape the political. It's just there. It just follows me around and it shows up. I can't do anything. I can't push it away. Yes, on to Jeet.
What's happened with Palestine and with Gaza, for example, is that for the last year especially, we've been seeing images and videos on our phones, and it's gotten to the point where I think a lot of us, the minute we know what it is and what it's going to be, we scroll past because we can no longer bear to look at those things. Some of those images are just so ghastly, and you feel somehow implicated. And I don't remember who it was who said this, but somebody once said that it's exactly the thing that makes you uncomfortable, that you don't want to write about, that you should write about. Because when you do that, something will come up out of it that you were not expecting. You'll surprise yourself, and that is going to be a valuable kind of layer on the work that you're working on. For me, in a poem especially, I have to be in the mood to write a poem, which is not true about prose. Fiction I can work on every day. It's like a 9-to-5 job. You just turn up at the office and you get to work. But a poem, I have to be in the mood, and it kind of flows, and I feel like I'm in a kind of a state of dream or trance or something at some point, and then images and lines occur that are in your head but that you had no intention of touching. And I find those are the most valuable lines in a poem, because things come up and invariably they are to do with the moment, with the political moment, with the things that you don't want to look at. And those things come up, and often in really unexpectedly kind of strange language. And then later when I look at those poems, those are the lines that resonate for me.
You know, also adding to that, when we are writing the political, at least for me, I feel like I'm very careful about making sure that ethical boundaries shouldn't be crossed, in the sense that, I mean, I want to bring up this quote by Immanuel Kant where he says, act in such a way that you treat humanity as a means, as not just a means, but the end itself. And I mean, basically, I think that when we look at other people, we need to start seeing everyone as someone to be loved and not a resource to be used. So when I'm writing also, I do ask myself, hey, they cannot be your topic. They cannot be this resource that you use. These are people who've been through so much. So yeah, I think as writers, we are constantly questioning what are those ethical boundaries, what lines can we cross. But yeah, the political always stays, for sure.
Any other questions? Yeah, Shweta.
Hello. My question is to the both of you. When the British-Hungarian writer won the Booker Prize this year, he started his acceptance speech saying that, thank you. He thanked his publisher saying, thank you for allowing me to take a risk, and for taking a risk with my novel, starting with the title, Flesh. So my question is, if this is the risk that every writer is afraid of, as writers, as poets, how far are you willing to go to take that risk? And if you feel that there is this muzzle over the freedom of expression, then why write?
I would like Jeet to answer that first, because I think some of your poems have been, they've asked you to remove them. Has that happened to you?
Yeah.
Because they're too political? Yes, tell us about that.
I think when that happens, when you're censored in that way, I think you've done something right. And we live in a climate where we do censor ourselves, which can be so incredibly damaging. I think, especially writers who, how to put it, who worry about what their aunties and uncles will think, which a lot of Indian writers do for some reason. They do censor themselves from certain subjects. That novel you were talking about, David Saleh's Flesh, that's a novel that I can't imagine an Indian writer writing, because they are thinking of Auntie Deepthi and Uncle Ashok peering over their shoulders and thinking, oh my God, did he or she just actually say that? We are our own worst censors, Indian writers.
Yeah, you're right about that. I think there is censorship from people in authority, and then there's also self-censorship. And this kind of turns into your shadow self that you need to go look into. I think I also remember, if I'm not wrong, when you were asked to remove these poems, you just went and put them up online, right? You published it in an online space. And even if that was not possible, you asked, then why write at all? If it boils down to that, I would just have to go with for the joy of it, I do write for the joy of it sometimes, and I don't show that work to anybody. But a lot of times writing is catharsis. It's not for the world. So I suppose that's what I have to say about it.
I love that idea that it's catharsis. And I think also it's a kind of magic in a way, because it's a spell that we cast on ourselves and hope to cast on the reader. And I think it's no accident that the word spell is part of the word spelling in words. You know, that is what some writing does. Catharsis and magic and some kind of superstitious connection with ghosts from our ancestors.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
You were speaking about the political and how things happening across the world affects you as writers. I understand poetry, but when you write something like Elsewhereans, where does this come and where does this angst get reflected in your writing, in your prose? Will that be manifested there in that prose? You said in poetry it comes in poetry, but when it is prose, it's kind of a 9-to-5 job. Does that angst, does that fear, concern reflect in your prose, in Elsewhereans perhaps? When you were writing, these things were happening. The world was a changed place.
Of course, that angst is reflected in what you're working on. The things that you worry about are always reflected in what you work on. But I was just reminded of a conversation I had a little while ago, like about an hour ago. A certain writer just wrote a book about her mother, in which she destroys her mother, pretty much. Kind of attacks her mother in such a way that her mother comes across as the villain of the piece, of the story. A woman who had died recently and who isn't able to argue her side of the story, is not able to fight back. And then you wonder if perhaps the timing of the book was such that the writer waited till the mother was dead, because the mother would have been ferocious in her defense and in her attack on the daughter who attacked her. So I'm just saying that in my book, there are parents in that book, a father and a mother. And of course, when you're growing, you have deep problems with your parents. But at some point, you get over it. And even if I hadn't, I would rather give up writing than write a book with the express intention of tearing down my mother. And if that's controversial, well, bring it on.
I do have different conflicting thoughts about that, but I will tell you after this session. Okay, any other questions? But wait, let me just say it. Don't you think that everybody's relationship with their mother is different? And if a parent is violent and the child is running away from that and they have a lot of trauma from that, don't you think them finally expressing that when said person has passed away, and they could love the mother too, because that's just how these complex relationships work. Don't you think, that's forgivable, that it's okay?
Of course, it's forgivable, but...
Because that's a lived experience we're talking about by the end of the day, right?
I just think the gracious, courageous thing to do would have been to do it while she was alive and could argue her corner.
Any other questions?
Amazing that we didn't have to mention the name and everybody knew.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to ask one more time. Does anyone have any questions to ask us? Or are we good? How are we with time?
I think we've hit the time.
Yes, because I don't think I look that way. I think they have been waving at us for a while. Okay.
We have people waiting in the wings. To
kick us out. That's great.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Megha, for stepping in.
Thank you so much.
Really.
Yeah.